March 17, 1892. In a small cemetery in Exeter, Rhode Island, a group of men gathered around a grave. They weren't there to bury someone. They were there to dig someone up. The villagers believed a young woman buried beneath the frozen ground was no longer truly dead. They believed she was feeding on the living. So they opened the coffin of a 19-year-old girl named Mercy Brown. And what they found inside convinced them they had uncovered a vampire. This is the true and tragic story of the American vampire of Rhode Island. In the late 1800s, a silent killer stalked communities across America. The disease was called tuberculosis, but most people knew it as consumption. The illness was slow and terrifying. Victims would grow pale. They lost weight rapidly. Their lungs weakened until they coughed up blood. Sometimes it took years. Sometimes it wiped out entire families. But in rural New England, many people didn't believe the disease was natural. They believed something far darker was happening. They believed the dead were draining the life from the living. The Brown family lived in a small farming community called Chestnut Hill. Their nightmare began in 1883. That year, the mother of the family, Mary Eliza Brown, died of consumption. Soon after, her daughter, Mary Olive Brown, began to show the same symptoms. She grew weaker month after month, until she too died from the disease in 1892. Then the illness struck the youngest daughter, a quiet 19-year-old named Mercy Brown. By the winter of 1892, Mercy was dead as well. 3 members of the same family, gone. But the tragedy was not over. Mercy's brother, Edwin Brown, had begun to waste away. The same pale skin, same coughing, same slow death. In New England during the 1700s and 1800s, there was a strange and terrifying belief. If multiple members of a family died from consumption, one of the dead might be feeding on the living. The only way to stop it was to dig up the body and destroy the organs believed to hold the vampire's power. Historians now call this phenomenon the New England Vampire Panic. Desperate to save Edwin Brown, the villagers urged the family to investigate the graves. And in March of 1892, they did something almost unthinkable. They exhumed the dead. On March 17, 1892, several men gathered at the cemetery in Exeter. They began opening the graves of the Brown family. First, the bodies of Mary Eliza and Mary Olive. Both were badly decomposed. But Mercy Brown's body was different. Because she had died during the winter, her body had been stored in a stone crypt above ground instead of being buried. When the coffin was opened, the villagers were shocked. Mercy's body appeared remarkably preserved, even more disturbing to them. Witnesses claimed there was still blood in her heart. To modern science, this is a normal result of cold preservation and decomposition. But to frightened villagers in 1892, it looked like proof. Proof that Mercy Brown was a vampire. The villagers decided they had found the source of the curse. Following old folk rituals, they removed Mercy's heart and liver. The organs were burned on a nearby rock. The ashes were collected, mixed with water, and given to her sick brother Edwin to drink. They believed this grisly medicine would cure him, but the ritual did nothing. Edwin Brown died of tuberculosis only 2 months later. The bizarre incident quickly spread through newspapers across the country. Many Americans were shocked that such a superstition could still exist in the modern age. But the story also arrived at a moment when the world was becoming fascinated with vampires. Just 5 years later, in 1897, author Bram Stoker would publish the Gothic novel Dracula. Some historians believe the Mercy Brown case helped fuel growing vampire mythology in America. But in reality, the story was never about monsters. It was about fear and the devastating mystery of a disease people didn't yet understand. Just 10 years before Mercy Brown's death, a German scientist named Robert Koch had discovered the bacterium responsible for tuberculosis. But scientific discoveries travel slowly. In isolated rural communities like Exeter, medical knowledge lagged behind. Without answers, people turned to folklore. They turned to superstition. They turned to vampires. The tragedy of Mercy Brown was not supernatural. It was a desperate attempt to explain an invisible killer. Today, the grave of Mercy Brown still rests in the quiet cemetery in Exeter. Visitors come from around the world to see it. Some leave coins, others leave flowers. Not for a vampire, but for a young woman whose death became one of the strangest legends in American history. The story of Mercy Brown reminds us how powerful fear can be when science is still catching up with the unknown. In 1892, a community believed they had destroyed a vampire. Instead, they created a legend. If you love ghost stories, folklore, and paranormal mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more haunted legends every week.